But if that option was not available, as America concluded that option was not their chosen path, it was okay then, by the UK government's view, for America to drop bombs on Iran. Was it legal?
The outcome, it isn't the means by which anyone in the British government would have wanted to see this occur. We wanted a peaceful diplomatic solution, as I believe this country should always want in every situation.
The UK's position all along has been to say, let's have calm, let's have de-escalation. Nobody's been listening to that, have they?
Well, we support, and always have done, the prevention of the Iranian regime obtaining nuclear weapons. You're right to say we hoped and proposed a peaceful diplomatic means to do that. It was the Iranians who were not willing to go along with that. But there's a couple of things, just listening to that quite rich and wide debate from the guests you've had on so far today. The first thing I want to say is, Laura, there'll be people at home watching. I know they'll be nervous. They'll say, what does this mean for them? And I want them to know that although the UK has not been involved in this military action, we have been preparing all week for all eventualities, including keeping British nationals safe and getting them to safety.
London's inclination for quiet diplomacy falls into post hoc agreement of Washington's kinetic remedy, leaving the minister defending an Amy Likes left by a technique he disavows empty. Make sure you like and subscribe.
It's where we are today. There's no point looking at those different actions.
But people at home will want to know. There is such a troubled history in this region, particularly in your party. People have very long memories and still a lot of upset about how the British government, a former Labour government, took action in the Middle East. And everybody knows what we're talking about. We're talking about the question of the legal or not legal invasion of Iraq. Now, we're not wanting to go over that, but this is why people really will want to know. Does the British government think that it was legal for America to drop bombs on Iran?
The question of legality, because the British government, the British armed forces were not involved, that is how we would assess that. I cannot speak for the American position on this because I wouldn't have access to all the information that they took this decision upon. But I think it's very important again to say, I understand the history will make people think of this in that way, but this is very different to what we saw with the invasion of Iraq. I mean, this is not
and it is very different.
The minister acknowledges public cynicism while dodging a judgment on lawfulness, separating today's Labour from wounds from the Blair era.
It's just very important people in this country know that the risk and the threat from Iran is not just to the region and what that might mean for economic security in the West or a country like this. Iran is a threat to this country, not in an abstract way, not in a speculative way, in terms of what we have to deal with week in, week out, cyber attacks on critical British national infrastructure, threats to people within the United Kingdom, on United Kingdom soil, including, by the way, to Iranian nationals who are dissidents against the Iranian regime. So the idea this is just a benign, theocratic dictatorship keeping itself to itself, no. And there is simply no way a responsible British government would ever allow that country to possess nuclear weapons.
But do you welcome, then, America's action? Was it the right thing to do?
Look, we wanted a diplomatic, peaceful means to do this.
Well, and you said that, but do you welcome these attacks? Was it the right thing to do?
But look, I wanted a different way to obtain this, but I cannot pretend to you that the prevention of Iran having a nuclear weapon is anything other than in the interests of this country.
So it is a good thing for the UK that this has happened?
Reynolds argues for strict policies outside of regional stability by redefining Iran as an instantaneous domestic threat. Make sure you like and subscribe.
When, then, will you prescribe or ban the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC? You promised to do that in opposition. The Home Secretary said that there'll be new laws to make that happen. But when will that actually take place, if, as you're saying, it presents such a clear and present danger to the UK?
There's a formal legal process the Home Secretary will undertake in relation to any prescription. It would be wrong to say, however, there's been any lack of preparation or naivety on our side as a government. I mean, the Foreign Interest Registration Scheme, is a very significant higher tier of treatment for anyone connected to the Iranian regime or Iranian business activity that we have to have in place, we put in place under this government. So those measures are there, and the threat is an active one.
But when will they actually be banned and prescribed? You say you've made all these preparations. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary now, talked about it a lot in opposition. So when will it happen?
Look, I don't have a timescale for you this morning, to be frank, so I won't speculate on that. But I can tell you these risks are considered as one of the highest priorities for the United Kingdom government.
Actionable pledges reveal a discrepancy between threat rhetoric and delivery dates when they stall in procedural fog.
In terms of prescribing, we've been talking about the Iranian group possibly being prescribed or banned by the UK government. That is a process that is taking some time. But we understand the government's immediately banning Palestine Action. Now, they're the group who, astonishingly, I think to most people's mind, managed to break into an RAF base at a time like this, with all the security risks around the world. I mean, here are the pictures of the fence. It looks like a fence down the side of your local allotment. Protesters managed to get into an RAF base, and now you're banning that group. Isn't that a farcical level of security at such a dangerous time?
Well, it is extremely concerning. They gained access to that base, and the Defence Secretary is doing an immediate review of how that happened. The actions that they undertook at Brize Norton were also completely unacceptable, and it's not the first. It's the fourth attack by that group on a key piece of UK defence infrastructure. So I can't comment again on that formal legal process that may or may not be prescription. But you should expect a very robust response if that is how you behave.
Who is behind that? Because it looks, with elements of someone on an electric scooter and some with fire extinguishers being repurposed to do spray paint on some RAF planes. You can see the images there. But who's behind that?
There are some active questions undergoing as to what the influence might be over a group like that. Clearly, their actions are unacceptable. They should expect a robust response if they're threatening and have threatened and intimidated key defence infrastructure in the UK.
A domestic security mistake turns into another front in the Iran story, connecting possible hostile state intervention with protest vandalism.
What do you think will happen next? And has the Prime Minister of this country spoken to President Trump about all of this? He always wants us to say how special the relationship is, how close an ally he is. Everybody's seen, in public at least, how Keir Starmer has gone a long way to try to buddy up with President Trump, as we all saw in the White House. Has he been in on these conversations? Did the UK know it was going to happen?
Yes, the United States does tell us in advance of activity like this. The Prime Minister will be talking to all of our international allies today, and there'll be a continuation of the work that has been going on across government all week.
We did specifically know about this?
We did know this was happening, yes. I mean, we are close allies. You would expect, I think, that level of communication. But just when you say the Prime Minister almost sort of saying, budding up to people, the Prime Minister fights for the interests of this country abroad. And what we prefer us to do, particularly when it comes to trade with the United States, that no other country has been able to do, is about protecting British jobs. That's what the job of the Prime Minister is. That's what my job is.
Advance notice highlights Britain's reactive role, kept informed, not decisive, as well as shows closeness with Washington.
Iran and the Iranian regime, because of their behaviour in the region, because of the risk that poses, and because of the risk and the activities they undergo in relation to this country, we couldn't allow them to have a nuclear weapon or nuclear facility. And I don't think that's in doubt. I don't think anyone is really saying that was not the Iranian objective behind this. This was about how we de-escalate the situation. Iran didn't listen to the calls for a diplomatic peaceful solution. That was a mistake. They should return to the negotiating table, and our focus now should be on de-escalation and stability.
But returning to the negotiation table to do what? To say what? I mean, we heard from the Iranian ambassador, it sounds like there's almost no chance that they've got any interest in doing that. What do you want them actually to do?
I think stability for the region would come about through an agreement where Iran would acknowledge that because of its behaviour, no country in that theatre or the wider world would be able to countenance it having nuclear weapons. It's not just interest to have nuclear weapons. If there is a genuine belief in civilian nuclear technology being necessary from an energy perspective for Iran, that's very easy to do and verify on an international basis. But I think people just have to be aware of the scale of the threat the Iranian regime poses. And if people understand that, there's no way anyone would countenance a nuclear-armed Iran.
Have previous governments, maybe even your government, been naive about that up until now then, do you think?
Look, there are some things that I think people are aware of that are in the public domain, but the threat from Iran is an active one. The preparations in response to that, the activities we have to undertake in response to that are not something that is at the back of people's minds. I mean, this is at the forefront of risks to the United Kingdom, and our security apparatus has to do a great deal to keep the country safe.
After airstrikes, the minister bets on diplomatic resurrection, even if he concedes years of Western naivety that supported Iran's brinkmanship. Kuenssberg's grilling traps Reynolds between principle and pragmatism. He praises the aim of stopping Iran's bomb, but won't label US strikes legal, elevates Tehran as a clear UK threat, but can't commit to banning its IRGC, and ties a British base break into possible foreign manipulation, while promising tougher responses still stuck in process. Let me know what you think down below in the comments.